Have you ever seen a ghost? Not the kind in horror movies, not the translucent figures that float through walls or rattle chains in the darkness. I'm talking about the kind of ghost that walks into a room, orders a black coffee, and sits down 20 feet away from you like he has every right to be alive. The kind of ghost who has a name tag that says Dan Miller when his real name is David Anderson. The kind of ghost who's supposed to be at the bottom of the Pacific Ocean, his body never recovered, his death certificate signed, his life insurance policy paid out in full. My name is Sarah Anderson. I'm 39 years old. 6 months ago, I became a widow when my husband of 12 years died in a boating accident off the coast of Northern California. I planned his funeral. I gave the eulogy. I watched them lower an empty casket into the ground because there was no body to bury. I wore black for months. I couldn't sleep in our bed. I survived on coffee and the sympathy casseroles my neighbors kept bringing over. I answered the same questions over and over. How are you holding up? Is there anything I can do? Have you thought about joining a support group? So I did. I joined a widow support group at the community center in Portland, Oregon, Tuesday evenings at 7 o'clock. 12 other people who understood what it felt like to lose the person you thought you'd grow old with. And that's where I saw him, my dead husband, very much alive, sitting in a circle with his arm around another woman who was crying about her late husband. This is the story of how I discovered my husband faked his death, stole $500,000 in insurance money, and started a new life with a new identity and a new girlfriend. This is the story of how I went from a grieving widow to a detective to a woman who had to decide, do I call the police or do I destroy him myself? This is the story of the worst 6 months of my life, followed by the most empowering decision I ever made. And it all started on a Tuesday evening when I walked into that support group room and saw a ghost drinking coffee. Let me take you back to the beginning, back to the day my husband died, or at least the day I thought he died. Chapter 1. The Death. 6 months earlier, March 15th, the phone call came at 2:47 in the morning. I know the exact time because I stared at the clock on my nightstand for what felt like hours after I hung up, watching the numbers change, watching 2:47 become 2:48, then 2:49, each minute carrying me further away from the life I knew and deeper into a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. Mrs. Anderson? The voice on the other end was professional but gentle, practiced, the voice of someone who'd made calls like this before. This is Lieutenant Morrison with the Coast Guard. I'm calling about your husband, David Anderson. My heart stopped before my brain could catch up. David was supposed to be on a weekend fishing trip with his friend Marcus, some annual guys' trip they did every March. He'd kissed me goodbye Friday morning, thrown his duffel bag in the back of Marcus's truck, and promised to bring me back fresh salmon. What happened? My voice came out as a whisper. Is he hurt? The pause that followed was the longest 3 seconds of my life. Ma'am, I'm very sorry to inform you that there was an accident. The boat your husband was on capsized approximately 40 miles off the coast near Crescent City. We received a distress signal at 11:23 p.m. By the time our rescue team arrived, we found Marcus Reeves clinging to debris. He was hypothermic but alive. And David? I was already out of bed, pulling on jeans with one hand, holding the phone with the other. Where's David? Another pause, longer this time. Mrs. Anderson, your husband is missing. The water temperature was 48 degrees. We've had search and rescue teams looking since midnight, but his voice trailed off, letting the unspoken truth hang in the air like a death sentence. 48 degrees. I remembered reading somewhere that you could survive maybe an hour in water that cold, maybe 2 hours if you were strong and lucky. It was now almost 3 a.m. If David had gone into the water at 11:23 p.m., that was over 3 hours ago. "But you're still looking," I asked, my voice rising with panic. "You're still searching. He could be out there. He's a strong swimmer. He could be—" "Ma'am, we're doing everything we can. We have 3 vessels and a helicopter searching the area, but I need you to understand the reality of the situation. The current is strong, the water is extremely cold, and it's been over 3 hours since the distress call." I sank onto the edge of the bed, the phone slipping slightly in my shaking hand. "I need to come there. Where do I go? Which hospital is Marcus at? I need to talk to him. I need to know exactly what happened." Lieutenant Morrison gave me the details. St. Joseph Hospital in Crescent City. Marcus was being treated for hypothermia and shock. I should drive carefully. They'd keep searching through the night. I don't remember hanging up the phone. I don't remember calling my best friend Amy, though apparently I did, because she showed up at my house 20 minutes later and drove me the 6 hours to Crescent City, while I sat in the passenger seat, staring out the window, watching the sunrise over a world that David was no longer part of. Marcus looked like he'd aged 10 years overnight. He was in a hospital bed, wrapped in heated blankets, an IV in his arm, his face pale and drawn. When I walked into his room, he started crying. "Sarah, I'm so sorry. I'm so goddamn sorry." I pulled a chair next to his bed and took his hand. It was still cold despite the blankets. "Tell me what happened, Marcus. Everything." He took a shaky breath and began. They'd been out on Marcus's fishing boat, a 23-foot cabin cruiser he'd owned for 5 years. Nothing fancy, but reliable. They'd been fishing all day, had a great catch, were heading back in when the weather changed suddenly. Wind picked up, waves got bigger. Marcus said he'd seen rough water before and wasn't too worried, but then a rogue wave hit them broadside. "It happened so fast, Sarah. 1 second we were fine, the next second the boat was flipping. I remember hitting the water. It was so cold I couldn't breathe. I came up, looked around for David, couldn't see him. I was screaming his name. The boat was capsized, floating upside down. I managed to grab onto it. I kept calling for David, kept looking, but—" Marcus's voice broke. "The waves kept pushing me away. I had the emergency beacon. I activated it. I held on to that boat for what felt like hours, kept thinking David would surface, would swim to me, but he never did. By the time the Coast Guard got there, I was barely conscious. They pulled me out. I kept telling them about David, that he was out there somewhere, but they never found him," I finished quietly. Marcus shook his head, tears streaming down his face. "Sarah, I swear to God, if I could have done anything different, if I could have saved him—" "I know," I said, though my voice sounded hollow even to my own ears. "I know you would have." But even then, sitting in that hospital room, something felt off, something I couldn't quite name, a small voice in the back of my mind asking questions I didn't want to hear. If Marcus had managed to hold on to the capsized boat, why hadn't David? David was a strong swimmer, stronger than Marcus. He'd been on the swim team in college. And why had they been so far offshore? 40 miles? That wasn't their usual fishing spot. Marcus usually stayed within 15 miles of the coast. But grief has a way of drowning out logic. I pushed those questions down, buried them under the weight of loss, and focused on the only thing that mattered. My husband was gone. The search continued for 4 days. Coast Guard vessels combed the area, helicopters flew grid patterns, volunteer boats from the local fishing community joined in. I stayed in a motel in Crescent City, waiting by the phone, jumping every time it rang, hoping for news, dreading news. On the 5th day, Lieutenant Morrison came to my motel room in person. "Mrs. Anderson, I'm afraid I have to tell you that we're suspending the active search. Given the water temperature, the time elapsed, and the ocean conditions, the likelihood of survival is, well, it's not possible. I'm very sorry." Not possible. Not unlikely or minimal. Not possible. But you didn't find him, I heard myself say. You didn't find his body. He could have made it to shore somewhere. He could be hurt and alone and— Ma'am, Lieutenant Morrison's voice was gentle but firm. In these situations, when the body isn't recovered, it typically means the ocean has claimed it. The currents in that area are strong. Your husband could be miles from where the accident occurred. I know this isn't the closure you want, but— Closure? The word tasted bitter. How am I supposed to have closure when there's no body, when I don't know for certain that he's gone? But I knew. Deep down, I knew. Or at least, I thought I knew. The funeral was 3 weeks later. An empty casket, a memorial service, a church full of people who kept telling me how sorry they were, how David was in a better place, how time would heal. I stood at the front of the church and gave a eulogy for a man whose body was somewhere at the bottom of the Pacific Ocean. David was my best friend, I said, my voice steady despite the tears streaming down my face. We met in college. He was studying marine biology. He loved the ocean. It's fitting, in a way, that the ocean is where he— I couldn't finish the sentence. I stood there, looking at the closed casket that held nothing but memories, and wondered how I was supposed to go on living in a world that didn't have David in it. Marcus was there, looking haunted. He caught my eye and mouthed, "I'm sorry," for what must have been the 100th time. David's parents were there, his mother sobbing into his father's shoulder. David's younger sister, Emily, read a poem she'd written. David's colleagues from the Marine Research Institute where he worked all wore matching blue ties in his honor. After the service, everyone came back to our house, the house David and I had bought 5 years ago, the house we'd planned to grow old in, the house that now felt impossibly empty. People ate casseroles and told stories about David. I smiled and nodded and accepted hugs from people whose faces I could barely see through the fog of grief. Amy stayed with me that night after everyone left. She helped me clean up, threw away paper plates, put food in the fridge. "Sarah," she said gently as we stood in the kitchen at midnight, "you need to sleep. You need to take care of yourself." I can't sleep in our bed. I can't go upstairs. So Amy made up the couch for me, and I slept there for the next 3 months. The insurance process was a nightmare. David had a life insurance policy through his work, $500,000. It seemed like a fortune. It also seemed like blood money. The insurance company needed documentation: death certificate, Coast Guard report, statement from Marcus, police report. But here's the thing about dying at sea with no body recovered. It's complicated. The state of California issued a death certificate after 30 days, but it said presumed dead, not confirmed dead. The insurance company wasn't satisfied. They sent an investigator, a woman named Patricia Chen, who had the emotional warmth of a tax audit. She interviewed me, interviewed Marcus, reviewed the Coast Guard reports, asked questions about David's mental health, our marriage, our finances. "It's standard procedure," she explained when I asked why she was treating me like a suspect. "In cases where there's no body and a significant payout involved, we have to rule out fraud." Fraud? The word hit me like a slap. You think my husband faked his own death? "I think people do desperate things for money," Patricia said evenly. "Was your husband in debt? Did he have gambling problems? Substance abuse? Extramarital affairs?" "No," I said firmly, "none of those things. David was a good man, a honest man. We had a happy marriage. We weren't rich, but we were comfortable. He had no reason to fake his death." Patricia made a note in her file. "Then you have nothing to worry about, Mrs. Anderson. We'll conclude our investigation within 90 days. 90 days. 3 months of living in limbo, not knowing if I'd be able to keep the house, pay the bills, survive. Amy lent me money. My parents sent checks. I went back to work at the graphic design firm where I was a senior designer, even though I could barely focus on anything for more than 10 minutes. And then, finally, on day 87, Patricia Chen called. "Mrs. Anderson, I'm calling to inform you that our investigation is complete. We found no evidence of fraud. Your claim has been approved. You should receive the payout within 7 to 10 business days." $500,000, the price of my husband's life. I should have felt relief. Instead, I just felt numb. The money hit my account on a Thursday. I logged into my bank app and stared at the number, $500,000. $500,000 I'd never wanted. I paid off the mortgage, paid off my car, put the rest in savings, tried to feel something other than emptiness. Amy suggested therapy. "Sarah, you need to talk to someone. You're barely eating. You're not sleeping. You're going through the motions of living, but you're not actually living." "I'm fine," I lied. "You're not fine, and that's okay. No one expects you to be fine, but you need help. Real help." She gave me a list of therapists. I put it on the fridge and ignored it for 3 weeks. And then, one night, I was lying on the couch at 2 a.m., scrolling through old photos of David on my phone, when I came across a video I'd forgotten I'd taken. It was from our anniversary the year before. We'd gone to a nice restaurant. David had ordered champagne. In the video, he's holding up his glass, looking at the camera with that smile I'd loved for 12 years. "To my beautiful wife, to 12 years of marriage and 50 more to come. I love you more today than the day I met you. Here's to forever." Forever lasted 11 more months. I watched that video 17 times that night, and on the 18th viewing, something clicked. The way David looked at the camera, the way his smile didn't quite reach his eyes, the way he said "forever" like he was trying to convince himself. Had he known? Had he been planning it even then? No, that was crazy. Grief was making me paranoid. But the thought, once planted, grew roots. That's when I finally called the therapist, Dr. Laura Martinez, 50-something, kind eyes, office that smelled like lavender. "Tell me why you're here, Sarah," she said in our first session. "My husband died 6 months ago. Everyone says I need therapy." "And what do you say?" I say I'm angry. I'm angry that he went on that stupid fishing trip. I'm angry that he didn't hold on to the boat like Marcus did. I'm angry that he left me alone. And I'm angry that I'm angry because he didn't choose to die. It was an accident, and I'm a terrible person for being mad at someone who drowned. Dr. Martinez nodded thoughtfully. "Anger is a normal part of grief, but I'm curious about something. You said he didn't hold on to the boat like Marcus did. Do you have doubts about what happened?" "No," I said automatically. Then, quieter, "Maybe. I don't know. Sometimes I have these thoughts, these questions, and then I feel guilty for questioning it, because what kind of person doubts their husband's death?" "What kind of questions?" So I told her about David being the stronger swimmer, about them being so far offshore, about the life insurance investigation and Patricia Chen asking about fraud, about that anniversary video where David's smile didn't reach his eyes. Dr. Martinez listened without judgment. "Sarah, I can't tell you whether your doubts are valid or whether they're a manifestation of grief, but what I can tell you is that unresolved questions can prevent you from healing. Sometimes we need answers before we can move forward." "But there are no answers. He's gone. The case is closed." "Is it?" Dr. Martinez asked gently. "Or is it just suspended? Because from where I'm sitting, it sounds like you have a lot of unanswered questions, and maybe before you can truly grieve, you need to answer them." That session planted a different kind of seed. Not paranoia, not conspiracy theories, just permission. permission to ask questions, permission to trust my instincts. I started digging. Not obsessively, not like I was trying to prove anything, just looking. I went through David's computer, his emails, his browsing history, his documents. Most of it was exactly what I expected. Work emails about research projects, online shopping for fishing gear, downloaded articles about marine conservation. But then I found a folder labeled Financial Planning 2023. Inside were spreadsheets, complex spreadsheets, breaking down our assets, our debts, our monthly expenses, projections for the next 5 years. At the bottom of one spreadsheet was a note in David's handwriting. Life insurance payout estimate $500K, minus taxes/fees, about $425K, enough to pay off mortgage, car, and leave $300K liquid. The note was dated February 15th, 1 month before he died. Why had David been calculating his life insurance payout? I told myself it was normal financial planning. People thought about these things. It didn't mean anything, but I screenshotted it anyway and sent it to myself, just in case. Over the next few weeks, I found more things. A receipt for a prepaid Visa card, $5,000, purchased 2 weeks before the fishing trip. An email confirmation for a storage unit rental in Oakland, started in January, paid for 1 year in advance. A deleted browser history I recovered using a tech recovery tool Amy's IT friend recommended. The history showed searches for how to survive cold water, hypothermia symptoms and recovery, life insurance payout timeline, and, most damning, countries with no extradition treaty with U.S. Each discovery was like a puzzle piece that didn't quite fit the picture I'd been given, but they also weren't proof, not really. They were just suspicious. I almost talked myself out of investigating further a dozen times. David was gone. I'd mourned him. I'd accepted it. Why was I trying to turn my husband into a criminal? But then I'd remember Dr. Martinez's words. Sometimes we need answers before we can move forward. So I kept digging. The storage unit was my breaking point. I drove to Oakland on a Saturday in September, 6 months after David's death, and found the facility, public storage on Telegraph Avenue. I didn't have a key, I didn't have the unit number, but I did have David's death certificate and my marriage certificate. I went to the office and explained that my deceased husband had rented a unit and I needed to access it to collect his belongings. The manager, a tired-looking man named Ron, looked sympathetic. "I'm sorry for your loss, ma'am. Let me look up the account. Name? David Anderson." Ron typed on his computer, frowned, typed some more. I've got a David Anderson, but the account was paid through December and there's a note here that says, "Do not contact renter under any circumstances. Emergencies only." That's unusual. Can I access it? I asked. Technically, as his widow with legal documentation, yes, but I need to make a copy of your IDs and death certificate for our records. 10 minutes later, I was standing in front of Unit 247. My hands shook as Ron cut the lock, David hadn't left me a key, and rolled up the door. Inside was mostly empty, but in the back corner were 3 large plastic storage bins. I opened the first one. Clothes. Men's clothes. Jeans, shirts, jackets, none of which I recognized. They weren't David's style. More casual, more rugged. The second bin had documents, a new laptop still in the box, prepaid phones still in packaging, a California driver's license in David's photo, but with a different name, Daniel Miller. The third bin hit me like a physical blow. Passports, 3 of them, one in David's real name, one in the name Daniel Miller, one in the name David Montgomery, all with David's photo. All stamps from the last 2 years. Mexico, Canada, Costa Rica, trips I hadn't known about. I sank to the floor of that storage unit, surrounded by evidence of a life my husband had been building in secret, and felt the world tilt on its axis. David hadn't died in that boating accident. David had planned it, and somewhere out there, he was still alive. I drove home in a daze. Part of me wanted to call the police immediately, turn in the evidence, let them handle it. But another part of me, the part that had loved David for 12 years, the part that had buried an empty casket, the part that had spent 6 months grieving a man who'd chosen to leave me, that part wanted something else. That part wanted to find him myself. That part wanted answers. That part wanted revenge. Back home, I spread everything from the storage unit across my dining room table. The fake IDs, the passports, the laptop, which I booted up, no password, which seemed careless for someone faking their death, the prepaid phones. On the laptop, I found more breadcrumbs, email accounts I didn't know about, correspondence with someone named M about the plan and after the transition, bank accounts in the Cayman Islands, booking confirmations for flights David had supposedly never taken. One email, dated March 10th, 5 days before his death, from M to David. Everything's set. R knows what to do. Clean exit, 6 months minimum before any contact. Stick to the plan, new life waiting. R. Marcus Reeves. Marcus had been in on it. Marcus had helped David fake his death. The betrayal hit me in waves. Not just David, but Marcus, our friend, the man who'd cried at David's funeral, the man who'd apologized to me with tears in his eyes. He'd looked me in the face and lied. I should have called the police then. I should have turned over everything I'd found and let the system handle it. But I didn't, because I needed to see him first. I needed to look David in the eyes and ask him why. Why had our marriage not been enough? Why had I not been enough? Why had he chosen to rip my heart out instead of just asking for a divorce like a normal person? I needed him to see what he'd done to me, and then I'd destroy him. Finding him should have been impossible, but David had made mistakes. The laptop had saved passwords. One of them was for a Gmail account under the name Daniel Miller. I logged in. Recent emails from a woman named Jennifer. Casual, flirty emails, planning dates, talking about her late husband and how meeting Dan had helped her heal. Jennifer was clearly David's new girlfriend, and she'd sent him an email just yesterday. Can't wait to see you Tuesday at group. These sessions are so much easier with you there. Heart. Group. Tuesday. I scrolled through their email chain and found it, a forwarded email from something called Healing Hearts Widow Support Group, Portland Community Center, Tuesdays at 7 p.m. Portland. David was in Portland. He'd been here in my city the entire time. Maybe he'd never even left. That Tuesday, I walked into the Healing Hearts Widow Support Group for the first time. The room was exactly what you'd expect. Fluorescent lights, uncomfortable chairs arranged in a circle, a table with coffee, tea, and cookies that no one touched. 12 people already seated. A facilitator, an older woman named Margaret, welcomed me warmly. "First time?" she asked. "Yes," I managed. "My husband died 6 months ago." "I'm so sorry, dear. Come, sit. We're just getting started." I took a seat in the circle, my heart pounding so hard I was sure everyone could hear it. And then he walked in. David, my dead husband. His hair was shorter. He'd grown a beard. He was wearing glasses, fake ones, I was certain. But it was him. Every cell in my body screamed in recognition. He was holding 2 cups of coffee. He handed one to a pretty blonde woman sitting across the circle from me. Jennifer, I presumed. He sat down next to her, put his arm around her shoulders, kissed her temple, and then, for the briefest moment, his eyes swept the circle and landed on me. I watched his face, watched for recognition, watched for panic, but there was nothing. His gaze moved right past me like I was a stranger. He didn't recognize me. 6 months. I'd lost 20 pounds from grief. I'd cut my hair short. I'd stopped wearing makeup. To David, no, to Dan, I was just another widow in a support group. The irony would have been funny if I wasn't currently experiencing what I can only describe as an out-of-body experience. Margaret started the session. Welcome, everyone. Let's start by going around the circle. State your name, and if you're comfortable, tell us a little about your loss. People shared. A man named Robert, whose wife died of cancer. A woman named Linda, whose husband had a heart attack at 47. Stories of real grief, real loss. And then it was David's turn. "Hi, I'm Dan," he said, his voice exactly the same as the voice that had said, "I love you" to me 1,000 times. "I lost my wife, Rachel, 8 months ago. Car accident. She was driving home from work and a drunk driver—" His voice caught convincingly. "Sorry, it's still hard to talk about." Jennifer squeezed his hand. "You're doing great," she whispered. I watched this performance in horror. He'd given himself a dead wife, a tragic backstory. He'd inserted himself into a grief support group, a place where people were genuinely suffering, and turned it into his cover story. How long had he been coming here? How many of these people had he lied to? "Dan's been so helpful to me," Jennifer said when it was her turn. "My husband, Michael, died a year ago, unexpected heart attack. I didn't think I'd ever feel normal again, but meeting Dan has shown me that it's possible to find happiness after loss." She looked at him with such genuine affection that I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. Then it was my turn. Margaret smiled at me encouragingly. "And you are—" "Sarah," I said, my voice surprisingly steady. "My husband died 6 months ago. Boating accident. They never found his body." I watched David's face as I spoke. Still nothing. No flicker of recognition, no panic. Just sympathetic nodding like he was just another support group member hearing just another tragic story. That must be so hard, not having closure. "Yes," I said, still looking at David. "Not knowing for certain is the worst part. Sometimes I wonder if he's really gone, or if he's out there somewhere, living a different life." Now I saw something, the briefest flash in David's eyes. Uncertainty, concern. But he recovered quickly. "I can't imagine," he said smoothly. "At least with Rachel I was able to say goodbye. Not having that closure must be torture." He looked right at me as he said it, and I realized he still didn't recognize me, but he was getting suspicious. The session lasted 90 minutes. I sat through all of it, drinking terrible coffee, listening to people share their pain, watching my not-dead husband pretend to be a grieving widower. When it ended, people milled around. Jennifer approached me. "Sarah, right? I just wanted to say I'm so sorry about your husband. The no-body thing. I can't imagine how hard that must be." "Thank you," I said, studying her. She seemed genuinely kind, genuinely caring. She had no idea she was dating a con artist. "This is Dan," she said, pulling David over. "Dan, this is Sarah. She just joined the group." David extended his hand. "Nice to meet you, Sarah." I took his hand, the hand I'd held for 12 years, the hand that had put a wedding ring on my finger, the hand that had packed a bag and walked out of my life, and shook it. "Nice to meet you too, Dan." His palm was slightly sweaty. Good, he should be nervous. "How long have you been coming to group?" I asked casually. "About 4 months," David said. "It really helps, having people who understand." 4 months. He'd been living in Portland, attending a grief support group, building a relationship with Jennifer, all while I was sleeping on my couch and crying myself to sleep. "I hope I'll see you next week," Jennifer said warmly. "Definitely," I replied. "I think I really need this." I didn't go straight home. I sat in my car in the parking lot and waited. An hour later, David and Jennifer came out together. They got into a silver Honda CR-V, Jennifer's car based on how she was driving. I followed them. They went to a diner, had a late dinner, laughed, held hands across the table. I sat 3 booths away wearing a baseball cap and sunglasses, watching them. Watching David be happy while I'd been destroyed. After dinner, Jennifer drove them to an apartment complex in Beaverton. A nice place, probably her apartment. David kissed her goodnight in the parking lot, then got into an Uber. I followed the Uber. It took him to a different apartment, a cheaper building in Gresham. I watched him go inside, watched the lights turn on in a second-floor unit. Then I went home and threw up in my bathroom for 20 minutes. I didn't sleep that night. I lay in bed, our bed, which I'd finally moved back into a month ago, and stared at the ceiling, my mind racing through 1,000 scenarios. Call the police, turn over the evidence, let them arrest him. But what if they didn't believe me? What if David had covered his tracks better than I thought? What if he had explanations for everything I'd found? No, I needed more. I needed irrefutable proof. I needed to understand the full scope of what he'd done. And I needed to do it without him knowing I was onto him. At 4 a.m., I got up and made a list. What I know. David faked his death with Marcus's help. He's been living as Daniel Miller for 6 months. He's in a relationship with Jennifer, unsuspecting widow. He has fake IDs, multiple passports, offshore accounts. He collected $500,000 insurance money, or rather I did in his plan. What I need to know. Where exactly is the insurance money? I got the payout, so how was he accessing it? Is Jennifer involved or just another victim? What was Marcus promised in exchange for his help? Is David planning to disappear again, or is Portland his permanent stop? Are there other people involved in this scheme? The plan. Keep attending support group, maintain Sarah the New Widow cover, follow David, document his movements, access his apartment if possible, confront Marcus, gather enough evidence that he can't talk his way out of it, decide, police or personal justice. I stared at that last line for a long time. 6 months ago, I would have called the police immediately. 6 months ago, I believed in the system, in doing the right thing, in letting justice take its course. But 6 months ago, I also believed my husband was dead. A lot can change in 6 months. I called in sick to work on Wednesday, then Thursday, then Friday. I told my boss I was having a grief relapse and needed a few days. She was understanding. I'd been a reliable employee for 8 years. I had the PTO saved up. What I really needed was time to become a detective. I bought a cheap used car off Craigslist, a nondescript gray Civic, so David wouldn't recognize my vehicle if he happened to notice he was being followed. I bought a good camera with a zoom lens. I bought a notebook and started documenting everything. Day 1, Wednesday. David left his Gresham apartment at 8:47 a.m. He took the bus, no car, which was smart for someone trying to live under the radar. I followed the bus route in my new Civic. He got off downtown and walked into a co-working space called WorkHive. He stayed there for 6 hours. I couldn't get inside without a membership, but I could see through the windows. He was at a laptop, looking like any other remote worker. What was he doing for work? He couldn't be using his marine biology credentials. Those were attached to his real identity. At 3 p.m., he left and went to a coffee shop. He met someone there. My heart stopped when I saw who it was. Marcus Reeves. They sat together for 45 minutes. I couldn't hear what they were saying, but I took photos. Lots of photos. Marcus looked stressed. David looked calm. At one point, Marcus raised his voice and David put a hand on his arm, clearly telling him to keep it down. Were they arguing? After they parted ways, David went back to his apartment. He ordered takeout. The lights in his apartment stayed on until 11 p.m., then went dark. I drove home exhausted, but wired with adrenaline. Day 2, Thursday. David's routine was different. He left his apartment at 10 a.m. and took an Uber to a gym. He worked out for 90 minutes. Then he went grocery shopping at Trader Joe's. Normal stuff, boring stuff. Except he was supposed to be dead. In the checkout line, he chatted with the cashier, laughing at something she said. He looked relaxed, happy. Did he feel any guilt at all? That afternoon, David met Jennifer for lunch at a Thai restaurant. I watched them through the window, sitting 2 tables away wearing a wig I'd bought online, shoulder-length brown hair, completely different from my actual short blonde cut. They talked and laughed. Jennifer touched his hand frequently. He kissed her knuckles at one point. I remembered when David used to kiss my knuckles like that, when he used to look at me the way he was looking at her. Had any of it been real, or had I been married to a stranger for 12 years? Day 3, Friday. This was the day everything shifted. David left his apartment early, 7 a.m. He took the bus to a bank I didn't recognize, Coastal Community Credit Union. He went inside for 20 minutes. When he came out, he was carrying a manila envelope. He walked 3 blocks to a FedEx office and mailed the envelope. I waited until he left, then approached the counter. "Excuse me," I said to the clerk. "My husband just mailed something, but I think he forgot to include something in the package. Tall guy, beard, glasses, just left?" "Oh yeah, I remember him, but sorry, the package is already in the system. You'd have to contact FedEx customer service to intercept it." "Do you remember where it was going? I might be able to call ahead." The clerk hesitated. "I'm not really supposed to." "Please, it's important. He's been so stressed lately, and if this package is wrong, it's going to make things worse." She sighed and pulled up the information on her computer. "It's going to Grand Cayman, some law office." "Thank you so much," I said, already backing away. Grand Cayman, the offshore accounts. David was moving money. That night, I did something I'm not proud of. I broke into David's apartment. I waited until I saw him leave. He had a date with Jennifer, dinner and a movie based on their text messages. Yes, I'd figured out how to access his phone remotely using the laptop from the storage unit and some questionable software Amy's IT friend had provided without asking too many questions. I picked the lock, thank you, YouTube tutorials, and slipped inside. The apartment was small, studio, sparsely furnished. It looked like a temporary living situation, not a permanent home. That was good news for my theory that he was planning to disappear again. I worked quickly, taking photos of everything. I found more prepaid credit cards, a second laptop hidden in the closet, more fake IDs. He had at least 6 different aliases. In the second laptop, I hit the jackpot. Email correspondence with someone named R. Chen at a law firm in Grand Cayman. David had been moving money from the offshore accounts he'd set up years ago, accounts I'd never known about, money he'd been siphoning from our joint accounts in small amounts over years. But here's what made me freeze. He was planning to leave. Again. An email dated 3 days ago. R. Chen, confirm receipt of wire transfer number 4. Total moved $780K. Remaining balance to be transferred by end of month. New identity documents should be ready by November 15th. Confirm flight arrangements from PDX to Panama City, departing December 1st. D. Miller identity to be retired after departure. December 1st. 6 weeks from now. David was planning to disappear again, this time to Panama, with a new identity and nearly $800,000 in stolen money. Not just the insurance money. He'd been planning this for years, stealing from our joint accounts, building his exit strategy. And Jennifer? She was just a placeholder, a cover story, someone to make Dan Miller look legitimate and sympathetic. I photographed everything, downloaded files to a USB drive, then I got out of there before he came home. That night, I made a decision. I wasn't calling the police. Not yet. Because the police would arrest him, sure, but then what? He'd get a lawyer, he'd maybe serve a few years for fraud, he'd eventually get out. And me? I'd be the wife who was too stupid to notice her husband planning his fake death for years. I'd be pitied, remembered as a victim. No, I wanted something else. I wanted him to feel what I'd felt, the betrayal, the shock, the complete destruction of reality. I wanted him to know that I knew, that I'd figured it out, that I'd been smarter than him. And then I wanted to destroy him so completely that he'd wish he'd actually drowned that night. Saturday morning, I showed up at Marcus Reeves' house unannounced. He lived in a nice neighborhood in Lake Oswego, married to his wife Diane for 15 years, 2 kids, both in middle school. Diane answered the door, surprised to see me. "Sarah, oh my God, how are you? We've been meaning to reach out, but Marcus said you needed space and—" "Is Marcus home?" I interrupted, my voice flat. "I need to talk to him." Yes, he's in the garage. Is everything okay?" "Not really, but it will be." I walked past her before she could respond, through their kitchen and out to the garage where Marcus was doing something to his car. He looked up when I walked in and the color drained from his face. "Sarah, what are you—" "I know," I said simply. "Know what?" But his voice was shaking. "I know David's alive. I know you helped him fake his death. I know everything, Marcus." He set down the wrench he was holding and sank onto a stool, putting his head in his hands. "Oh God. Oh God, Sarah, I'm so sorry." "Sorry?" The word came out like a whip crack. "You're sorry? You looked me in the eye at his funeral and cried. You let me grieve a man you knew wasn't dead. You're sorry?" "He said you'd be better off," Marcus said, desperately. "He said the marriage was over anyway, that you'd be financially secure with the insurance money, that this was the cleanest way." "Cleanest?" I was shaking with rage. "Cleanest? He stole from me. He let me think I was a widow. He put me through hell." I know, and I've been sick about it every single day since it happened." Marcus looked up at me with red-rimmed eyes. "You have to believe me, Sarah. I didn't want to do it. But David was my best friend since college, and he was desperate, and he said if I didn't help him, he'd do it anyway, and it would be messier, and—" "Why?" I cut him off. "Why did he need to fake his death? What was he desperate about?" Marcus hesitated. "Tell me," I demanded, "or I go to the police right now with everything I know, and you go down for insurance fraud, conspiracy, and whatever else they can charge you with. Your wife, your kids, they'll all know what you did." That broke him. "He was in debt," Marcus said quietly. "Gambling debt, about $400,000 to some very bad people, people who were threatening to kill him if he didn't pay up." The floor tilted. "What?" "David had a gambling problem. Online poker, sports betting, high-stakes stuff. He'd been hiding it from you for years. He'd cleaned out his retirement account, maxed out credit cards you didn't know about, borrowed from loan sharks. And last year, he got in deep with some organized crime guys. They gave him a deadline: pay up or die." I sank against the garage wall. "He told me we were fine. We had savings. We were planning to buy a bigger house next year." You had savings in your account, but his accounts were empty. He'd been stealing from your joint account in small amounts for years, trying to dig himself out, but it was never enough. The gambling addiction just got worse. So he decided to fake his death and collect the life insurance money to pay off his debts? Not collect it himself, you'd collect it, and he was planning to get it from you later. The pieces clicked into place. He was going to come back, eventually. He was going to pretend he had amnesia, or had been held captive, or some bullshit story, and I'd be so relieved he was alive that I wouldn't question it too hard, and the insurance money would be in our joint account, and he'd have access to it. That was the original plan, Marcus admitted, but then he said it evolved. He realized he could start over completely, new identity, the insurance money plus the money he'd been hiding offshore, a clean slate. And you went along with this. He said the alternative was these guys killing him, making it look like an accident, and then you'd get nothing, no insurance payout, because it would be investigated as possible murder. He said this way, at least you'd be taken care of financially. How noble, I said sarcastically. And what did you get out of it? Marcus looked away. I paid off my mortgage, $250,000. He had money hidden, like I said. He paid it off a month before the accident, told Diane it was a bonus from work. So you sold me out for $250,000? Sarah, does Diane know? No, God no. She'd leave me. She'd take the kids. Good, I said coldly, because you're going to help me. Marcus looked up, confused. What? You're going to help me take David down, completely. Or I tell Diane everything, and then I go to the police, and your life as you know it ends. Sarah, I can't. Those people he owed money to, if they find out he's alive, then David should have thought about that before he decided to fake his death and destroy my life, I interrupted. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to tell me everything, every detail of the plan, everyone involved, and then you're going to help me set up a meeting with David, a meeting where he doesn't see me coming. What are you going to do? I'm going to give him a choice, I said. Turn himself in and face the consequences, or I expose everything, to the police, to the people he owes money to everyone. Either way, his new life is over, but one way he lives, the other way. I didn't finish the sentence. I didn't need to. Marcus talked for 2 hours. He told me everything, the planning that had started a year before the accident, the fake distress beacon, how Marcus had actually capsized the boat on purpose in relatively calm waters, not during a storm, how David had swum to shore 15 miles away where a car was waiting, how they'd practiced the whole thing 3 times before executing it. He told me about the other person involved, someone named Alexei, who apparently specialized in creating fake identities for people who needed to disappear. Alexei had provided the fake IDs, the passports, the new social security number. He told me about David's plan to go to Panama, where apparently you could buy citizenship if you had enough money, and where the U.S. had limited extradition agreements for financial crimes. And he told me about the gambling debt collectors, a crew run by someone named Dmitry Volkov, who operated out of Seattle. David had paid them $400,000 from his offshore accounts 2 weeks after his death. They thought he was dead. If they found out he wasn't, they'd kill him for real this time. They don't forgive people who try to cheat them by faking their deaths. I absorbed all of this, my mind racing. Give me Dmitry Volkov's contact information, I said. Sarah, no, you can't. Give it to me or we're done here, and Diane gets a very interesting phone call. Marcus, pale and shaking, wrote down a phone number. Chapter 4. The Widow Reveals Herself. The following Tuesday, I went back to the support group. I'd spent the last few days planning, preparing, getting everything in order. Tonight was the night. I arrived early and pulled Margaret aside. Margaret, I need to talk to you about something. It's about Dan Miller. She looked concerned. Is everything all right? No, but it will be. I need you to trust me. After the session tonight, I need you to ask Dan to stay behind. Tell him you want to check in with him privately. Can you do that? Sarah, what's going on? I promise, I'll explain, but please, it's important. Life and death important. His silence was answer enough. Both, I realized. You had two plans. If you needed the money, you'd come back with a story. If you didn't need it, you'd just let me keep it and disappear forever. Either way, you won. Sarah, please. Those people I owed money to, they would have killed me. So you killed yourself first. Killed your old life. Killed our marriage. Killed any trust I'll ever have in another human being. But hey, at least you got to start fresh, right? New name, new girlfriend, new life. Jennifer doesn't know, David said quickly. She thinks I'm really Dan. She thinks Rachel was real. She's innocent in all this. I know. I've been following you both for a week. I know your whole routine. I know about your apartment in Gresham. I know about the co-working space. I know about your meeting with Marcus last week. I know about the money you're moving to Grand Cayman. I know about your planned flight to Panama on December 1st. David's face had gone from white to green. How did you? I broke into your apartment, cloned your laptop, tracked your phone. Turns out, when someone destroys your life, you get really motivated to return the favor. I pulled out my phone and opened a folder of photos, evidence, documents, bank statements, everything. I have proof of everything, David. The fake IDs, the offshore accounts, the money you stole from me over the years to feed your gambling addiction, the insurance fraud, Marcus's involvement, all of it. What are you going to do? He asked, and for the first time I heard real fear in his voice. That depends on you, I said. I'm going to give you a choice. 2 options. Choose carefully. I held up one finger. Option 1, you turn yourself in, tonight. We walk out of this building and go straight to the police station. You confess to everything. Insurance fraud, identity theft, theft of marital assets. You face the legal consequences. You do your time. Marcus does his time, but you live. You serve maybe 5 years, get out, start over legitimately. I held up a second finger. Option 2, you refuse. You try to run, and I make a phone call to Dmitry Volkov. The name hit him like a physical blow. You wouldn't, he breathed. Wouldn't I? I leaned forward. You destroyed my life, David. You made me think you were dead. You let me grieve you. You stole from me. You used me. So yes, I absolutely would call the man you owe $400,000 and tell him that David Anderson is alive and well, living in Portland under the name Daniel Miller and planning to flee the country with nearly $1 million in 6 weeks. David, those people will kill me, actually kill me. I know. That's why it's called a choice. Prison or death. Which one sounds better? This is insane. You're not a killer. You're not. I'm not doing anything, I interrupted. I'm just making a phone call. What Dmitry does with that information is up to him. Just like what you did to me was up to you. Actions have consequences, David. You taught me that. We sat in silence for a long moment. I could see him calculating, looking for a way out, looking for an angle. What about the money? He finally asked. The insurance payout. It's in your account. I need that money to pay. You already paid Dmitry, Marcus told me, $400,000 2 weeks after you died. You paid him with money from your offshore accounts, so that excuse doesn't work. There are other people, other debts. Not my problem. You created this mess. You fix it. Or don't. Either way, your run is over tonight. I need time to think, to figure out. No, I stood up. You choose now. We walk to the police station together, or I make a phone call. 5 seconds. Choose. Sarah, please. 4. You can't just. 3. I'm your husband. 2. Not anymore. I had a husband. He died 6 months ago. You're just a stranger who looks like him. 1. Okay. David stood up, hands raised in surrender. Okay, I'll turn myself in. I'll go to the police. I'll confess to everything. Just don't call Dimitri, please. I studied his face, looking for the lie, the deception. But all I saw was fear. Good. We walked out of the community center together. Margaret was waiting in the hallway, looking confused and concerned. Sarah? What's going on? Call the police, I told her. Tell them we have someone who needs to confess to insurance fraud, identity theft, and faking his own death. Margaret's eyes went wide. What? His name is David Anderson. He's been living as Dan Miller. He's not a widower. He faked his death 6 months ago. I'm his wife, his actual wife, the one he let think she was a widow. David said nothing. He just stood there, defeated. Margaret pulled out her phone with shaking hands and dialed 911. The police arrived in 12 minutes. I'd prepared for this moment. I had the USB drive with all the evidence in my purse. I had printed copies of the most damning documents. I had Marcus's written confession. Yes, after our conversation, I'd made him write and sign a confession in case David tried to deny everything. When the officers arrived, I handed it all over. This man is David Anderson. He's supposed to be dead. Here's his death certificate. Here's his life insurance payout. Here's proof he's been living under the false identity of Daniel Miller. Here's evidence of offshore accounts, fake passports, and planned flight to Panama. Here's a signed confession from his accomplice, Marcus Reeves. And here's his plan to steal $800,000 and flee the country. The officers looked at the evidence, then at David, then at me. Ma'am, how did you acquire all this evidence? I'm a graphic designer, I said calmly. I'm good with computers, I'm good at research, and I was very motivated. You'll find everything there is completely legitimate, nothing obtained illegally. This was not entirely true, but they didn't need to know about the breaking and entering. They arrested David on the spot, read him his rights, handcuffed him. As they walked him toward the police car, he looked back at me. Sarah, I really am sorry, for what it's worth. It's not worth anything, but maybe you'll have 5 years in prison to think about that. Chapter 5. The Aftermath. The next few weeks were a blur. David was charged with insurance fraud, identity theft, theft of marital assets, and a handful of other crimes I couldn't even name. Marcus was arrested 3 days later. He confessed immediately, cooperating fully in exchange for a reduced sentence. He got 18 months. His wife filed for divorce. David's gambling addiction came out in the media. The news ran the story. Marine biologist fakes his own death, caught by wife 6 months later. I was interviewed by several news outlets. I declined most of them. I didn't want to be famous for being a victim. Jennifer, David's unwitting girlfriend, was devastated. I met with her once at her request. I'm so sorry, she said, crying. I had no idea. I really thought he was who he said he was. I know, I told her gently. So did I, for 12 years. Did you ever really know him? I thought I did, but looking back now, I'm not sure I ever knew the real David Anderson. Maybe there is no real David. Maybe he's always been whoever he needed to be to get what he wanted. She cried harder. I let her. When she'd composed herself, she asked, How did you do it? How did you hold it together enough to investigate and find him and confront him? I feel like I'm falling apart, and I only knew him for 4 months. I fell apart first, I admitted. For 6 months I was destroyed, but then I got angry. And anger is a hell of a motivator. The trial happened 9 months later. David pleaded guilty to all charges. His lawyer negotiated a sentence, 7 years in federal prison with possibility of parole after 5. I attended the sentencing hearing. The judge asked if I wanted to make a victim impact statement. I did. I stood at the podium and looked at David, sitting at the defense table in an orange jumpsuit, looking smaller and older than I remembered. "Your Honor," I began, "David Anderson was my husband for 12 years. I loved him. I trusted him. I built a life with him. And then he chose to destroy all of that by faking his own death, rather than talking to me about his problems." I paused, collecting my thoughts. For 6 months I grieved him. I cried every day. I couldn't sleep. I lost 20 pounds. I planned his funeral. I gave his eulogy. I paid off our mortgage with life insurance money I thought was supposed to compensate me for losing my husband. But he wasn't dead. He was in Portland, living under a fake name, dating another woman, planning his escape to Panama with nearly $1 million he'd stolen over years. The betrayal isn't just about the money. It's about the fact that he had so little respect for me that he didn't think I deserved the truth. He didn't think I deserved a conversation. He didn't think I deserved a choice. He chose to let me suffer rather than face his own mistakes, and that, Your Honor, is what I'll never forgive. I looked directly at David. I hope you spend every day of the next 5 years thinking about what you did, not just to me, but to Jennifer, who genuinely cared about you, to Marcus, whose life you ruined, to your parents who buried an empty casket, to everyone who loved the person they thought you were. I hope you think about what you gave up, because you didn't just fake your death, David. You killed any chance of ever being truly known or truly loved. You'll spend the rest of your life wondering if anyone who claims to care about you is real or just another cover story. You'll spend the rest of your life looking over your shoulder. That's a worse prison than any the state can give you. I stepped down. David was crying. I felt nothing. 3 months after the sentencing, I was sitting in Dr. Martinez's office. "How are you feeling?" she asked. "Honestly, I don't know. I thought I'd feel satisfaction, closure, something, but mostly I just feel empty." "That's normal," Dr. Martinez said gently. "You've spent the last year in survival mode, investigation mode, justice mode. Now that it's over, you're left with the actual grieving process you never got to finish." "But he's not dead." "No, but the man you thought he was, that man is dead. The marriage you thought you had, that's dead. You're grieving the loss of 12 years of your life that you now realize were built on lies." She was right. Over the next year, I actually grieved. Not for David, but for the Sarah I used to be. The Sarah who trusted easily, who believed the best in people, who thought her marriage was safe. That Sarah was gone. But maybe that was okay. Maybe the new Sarah, the one who'd tracked down her supposedly dead husband, gathered evidence, and held him accountable, maybe she was stronger. 2 years after David's arrest, I was having coffee with Amy. "So," she said casually, "I heard David applied for early parole." "I know. His lawyer sent me a notice. I submitted a statement opposing it." "Do you think about him?" "Sometimes. Not the way you'd think, though. I don't miss him. I don't wish things had been different. Mostly, I just feel grateful. Grateful that I found out, that I didn't spend the rest of my life with someone who could do that to me, that I learned I'm stronger than I thought I was." Amy smiled. "You are. You're a badass, actually. You know that, right?" I laughed. "I don't feel like a badass. I feel like someone who survived something terrible and came out the other side. That's literally what a badass is." 5 years after David was arrested, I was living in a new city. I'd moved to Seattle. New job, new apartment, new life. I'd changed my name back to my maiden name, Sarah Mitchell. I wasn't going to carry the Anderson name anymore. That belonged to a different life. I'd started dating again. Nothing serious, just reminding myself that not everyone was a liar, not everyone was a con artist. Some people were actually who they said they were. It was terrifying and exhilarating at the same time. One day, I received a letter from the Oregon Department of Corrections. David had been released on parole after serving 5 years of his 7-year sentence. The letter informed me of his release date, his parole conditions, and included a victim notification that I was entitled to know his whereabouts. He was living in a halfway house in Eugene, working at a marine conservation nonprofit, attending mandatory therapy, wearing an ankle monitor. There was also a personal letter enclosed. Against my better judgment, I opened it. Dear Sarah, I know I don't deserve forgiveness. I know I destroyed your life and betrayed your trust in the worst possible way. I know that no amount of time in prison can undo what I did to you. I've spent the last 5 years in therapy. I've faced my gambling addiction. I've worked through why I made the choices I made. None of it excuses what I did to you. But I want you to know that I understand now what I couldn't understand then. I was a coward. I was selfish. I was so focused on my own problems that I couldn't see the devastation I was causing to everyone around me, especially you. You deserved honesty. You deserved a partner who trusted you enough to share his struggles. You deserved a chance to help me, or at least to make your own choice about whether to stay or leave. I took that choice away from you. I took 6 months of your life and filled them with unnecessary grief. I took 12 years of memories and poisoned them with lies. I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't even expect you to read this, but I needed to say it. I'm sorry. Truly, deeply sorry. I heard you moved to Seattle. I heard you're doing well. I'm glad. You deserve every happiness. I won't contact you again. This is goodbye. I hope someday you can remember the good parts of what we had without the pain of how it ended overwhelming everything else. David. I read the letter 3 times. Then I put it in a drawer and went about my day. That night, I sat on my Seattle apartment balcony with a glass of wine and thought about everything that had happened. 5 years since I'd walked into that support group and seen a ghost. 6 years since David had supposedly drowned. 17 years since I'd met him in a college marine biology class and thought he was the one. It felt like several lifetimes ago. I thought about the Sarah who'd stood in that church giving a eulogy for a man who wasn't dead. I thought about the Sarah who'd discovered fake passports in a storage unit and felt her world shatter. I thought about the Sarah who'd sat across from David in that community center and given him a choice, prison or death. That Sarah had been forged in fire, and the Sarah sitting here now, drinking wine on a Seattle balcony, living in a city where nobody knew her story, building a life that was entirely her own, she was someone different, someone stronger, someone who didn't need another person to complete her, someone who could look at David's apology letter and feel nothing, not anger, not sadness, not even satisfaction, just nothing. And that, I realized, was the real closure. 6 months after receiving David's letter, I was at a coffee shop when I ran into someone unexpected. Jennifer, David's ex-girlfriend, the woman who'd been just as deceived as I had been. We recognized each other immediately. "Sarah," she said, surprise and uncertainty in her voice. "Jennifer, hi." An awkward pause. "Do you want to sit?" I offered, gesturing to the empty chair at my cable. She hesitated, then nodded. We sat in silence for a moment, both of us processing the strange coincidence. I moved to Seattle a few months ago, Jennifer finally said. Fresh start. I couldn't stay in Portland after everything. I moved here 5 years ago, for the same reason. Did you... She paused. Did you get his letter? You got one too? She nodded. About 6 months ago. Apology, explanation, the whole thing. Did you respond? No. Did you? No. Another silence. Then Jennifer laughed, a bitter, sad sound. Isn't this ridiculous? Two women sitting in a coffee shop bonding over being screwed over by the same man? It's something, I agreed. Can I ask you something? Jennifer said. How did you do it? How did you move on? Because I only knew him for 4 months and it still messed me up. You were married to him for 12 years. I thought about it, really thought about it. Honestly, I got angry, and then I got even, and then when that was done, I had to learn how to be a person again. Not his wife, not his victim, just Sarah. Did you ever figure out if any of it was real? Jennifer asked quietly. Any of the feelings, the connection, the love? It was the question I'd asked myself 1,000 times. I think some of it was real, or at least real for him in the moment, but David is someone who becomes whoever he needs to be to get. When he was with me, he was a husband because that's what the situation required. When he was with you, he was a grieving widower because that's what fit his cover story. So we never really knew him. I don't think David knows himself, I said. I think he spent so long being other people that he forgot how to be a real person. Jennifer nodded slowly. That's sad. It is, but it's not our responsibility to fix him. No, she agreed, it's not. We talked for another hour about our new lives, our jobs, how we were both in therapy, how we were both learning to trust again. By the end, we exchanged numbers. Maybe we could get coffee again sometime, Jennifer suggested, if that's not too weird.
It's extremely weird, I said with a smile. But sure, why not? As I walked home that day, I realized something. David had tried to destroy me. He'd tried to erase me from his life. He'd treated me as disposable. But here I was, still standing, still living, building new connections, moving forward. He was the one in a halfway house, wearing an ankle monitor, living with the consequences of his choices. I was the one who was free. Epilogue, 3 years later. I'm sitting in a different coffee shop now, different city. I moved to Vancouver, Canada last year for a promotion. Different life entirely. I'm 48 years old. I've been divorced from David for 8 years. Yes, I divorced him while he was in prison. I'm currently dating someone named Michael, who's a veterinarian and knows the whole story and loves me anyway. I still see Dr. Martinez via video calls, still working through things, probably always will be. Jennifer and I are still friends. She's married now to someone who's actually who he says he is. She sends me photos of her wedding. I sent flowers. Marcus got out of prison after 18 months, reconciled with his wife somehow, and moved to Arizona. We don't talk. David's parents tried to reach out to me a few years ago. I politely declined. Some bridges, once burned, should stay that way. And David? Last I heard, he was still in Eugene, still working at the marine conservation nonprofit, still in therapy, still paying restitution. He owes me $500,000 plus interest, which he's paying back at $200 a month, which means I'll be fully paid back in approximately 208 years. I don't think about him much anymore, but sometimes when I'm having a hard day or doubting myself, I remember that support group room.
It's extremely weird, I said with a smile, but sure, why not? As I walked home that day, I realized something. David had tried to destroy me. He'd tried to erase me from his life. He'd treated me as disposable. But here I was, still standing, still living, building new connections, moving forward. He was the one in a halfway house, wearing an ankle monitor, living with the consequences of his choices. I was the one who was free. Epilogue, 3 years later. I'm sitting in a different coffee shop now, different city. I moved to Vancouver, Canada last year for a promotion. Different life entirely. I'm 48 years old. I've been divorced from David for 8 years. Yes, I divorced him while he was in prison. I'm currently dating someone named Michael, who's a veterinarian and knows the whole story and loves me anyway. I still see Dr. Martinez via video calls. Still working through things. Probably always will be. Jennifer and I are still friends. She's married now to someone who's actually who he says he is. She sends me photos of her wedding. I sent flowers. Marcus got out of prison after 18 months, reconciled with his wife, somehow, and moved to Arizona. We don't talk. David's parents tried to reach out to me a few years ago. I politely declined. Some bridges, once burned, should stay that way. And David? Last I heard, he was still in Eugene, still working at the marine conservation nonprofit, still in therapy, still paying restitution. He owes me $500,000 plus interest, which he's paying back at $200 a month, which means I'll be fully paid back in approximately 208 years. I don't think about him much anymore, but sometimes, when I'm having a hard day or doubting myself, I remember that support group room.
I remembered the moment I looked across the circle and saw my dead husband drinking coffee with another woman. I remember the shock, the rage, the absolute clarity that came after. I remember becoming someone who could track down a man who'd faked his death, someone who could break into apartments and clone laptops and gather evidence and confront a liar without flinching. I remember giving him a choice and watching him choose prison over death. And I remember walking out of that police station, watching them drive him away in handcuffs and feeling something I hadn't felt in 6 months. Power. Not power over him, power over my own life. The power to decide that I wasn't going to be a victim, I was going to be a survivor. And then, eventually, I was going to be something even better. Someone who could look back at the worst thing that ever happened to her and say, that happened. It was terrible, and I survived it. And now I'm here, living a life that's entirely mine, and that bastard has no power over me anymore.